Everyone, we're joining today for a special executive session on June 22nd, 2021, and I see we have a quorum, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion to go into closed session?
I move to go into closed session.
Okay, Ms. Smith?
I second.
Ms. Basine, seconds.
Dr. Martin, just for clarity, we're having a special meeting that includes closed session, and then we're going to continue after that closed session with open session.
Right.
Okay.
We're having an open session to talk about the pay raise, or bonuses, one-time bonuses. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Move that members of the school board go into a closed session for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of Section 2.2-3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended for the purpose of the discussion, consideration, or interviews or of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the Norfolk Public Schools pursuant to subsection 1 of the above cited code section. The subject of this session is the discussion and consideration of the superintendent's performance for purposes of the annual evaluation required by section 22.1-60.1 of the Code of Virginia, 1970, and provisions of the superintendent's contract. Basine?
Aye.
Campson? Oh,
Aye.
okay. Clanton?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
And Martin.
Aye. Okay, thank you all, and we will go into the conference room to continue. Can I get a motion to come out of closed session?
Madam Chair, I move that we exit closed session and certify.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. Thank you for seconding, Ms. Smith. Ms. Teener, please read the
Yes.
resolution.
Basine?
Aye.
Campson?
Aye.
Wait,
Clayton.
you need
Oh,
to
I'm
read the
sorry.
resolution to come out of
Whereas
closed
the school
session?
board of the city of Norfolk has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the school board of the city of Norfolk that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be resolved that the school board of the city of Norfolk hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by the Virginia law were discussed in the executive meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the executive meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the school board of the city of Norfolk. Now, Basine.
Aye.
Campson.
Aye.
Clanton.
Aye.
Jordan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
And Martin.
Aye. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now we'll begin the open portion of our meeting. I'm pulling it up here, where we will be
Hey, can you come on down
discussing employee bonus, one-time bonus considerations. And we'll go ahead and get started. Or, actually, can you
now? Mr.
please?
Jenkins on his way down.
Okay. Do we formally need to call roll? Ms. Tanner? Yeah, go ahead.
Basine.
Aye. I mean, here.
Campson.
So Ms.
Step up.
Camps,
She's in the restroom.
Ms. Campson was present and she's left now, so we just need to,
Clanton.
present.
Jordan.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Martin.
Here. And Ms. Campson will be joining us in just a minute. Okay, Dr. Birdsong, who will be presenting first? Okay, so we're waiting on Mr. Jenkins. Good evening, Mr. Jenkins. Can you please approach the lectern? And we're ready for you to begin whenever you are. Are you having trouble hearing him?
Yeah, we'll make sure his mic is on.
Is the light on? No.
There you go.
Okay. Okay. Tonight, we're going to talk about pay raises, and I thought I would start with just giving you a little brief, I guess, explanation of the rationale for the bonuses that Dr. Birdsong had proposed and you had approved back several months ago. It was certainly to reward employees for the extraordinary efforts that they undertook in support of quality instruction in the midst of a pandemic. It recognized employees whose job required that they perform in a manner very different from what they normally did. Examples would be virtual learning and concurrent learning. They applied to a broad range of job classes that required employees to go above and beyond what is typically required to overcome challenges and obstacles and ensure that we provided a positive environment and experience for all students. It was flexible and resilience and made possible equity and excellence. And then it also included employees who were exposed to risk. So there were certain employees that were working very close together, custodial employees, food service employees, so they were also included. The folks who received the bonuses were very specific. It was full-time contracted school-based employees, which included a huge swath of this city's or the school board's employees. These included all teachers, teacher assistants, media specialists, counselors, principals, assistant principals, custodians, food service employees, nurses, social workers, psychologists, just about everyone that had a teacher's, in fact, everyone that had a teacher's contract was included. It included full-time contracted instructional technology resource teachers that work in schools but are supervised centrally. And then contracted school nutrition staff at not just at the school level but also at the central level. We included some of the facility management, a very small number. It was the ones that were directly connected with sanitizing school facilities. And then there were also positions in technology that kept our networks operating and enabled the distance learning that was taking place. Most employees received a check of $1,000. The earnings were sufficient to take care of tax withholdings that had to be paid, which was generally about $500 or $550. There were two exceptions. One was for employees that were hired after September 30 of 2020. And for those employees, the bonus was prorated based on the number of days worked. The other exception would be employees who had outstanding tax liens or court-ordered garnishments. We are required to withhold earnings for those, and that was done in order to settle or address creditor claims. There are a couple of positions that you spoke of last week and that we feel like we should have included and would recommend that they be included in a second round of bonuses. These would include long-term teacher substitutes. And when I say long-term, I'm referring to positions that were replacing either a vacant teaching position or a teacher who may have been on a long-term leave, for instance, a family medical leave. Part-time employees who were working in support of school nutrition. So these would be cafeteria workers that were making sure that food was at the sites, at the distribution sites, so the children and their families could pick those up. Bus drivers and assistants who took responsibilities of school nutritional staff. We had some drivers and assistants, a few who actually were working with the school nutrition staff. And then part-time custodians. Again, initially, the bonuses were only covering full-time contracted people. So we felt like the part-time custodial employees should have been included. Each of these groups faced the same conditions that the contracted staff were facing. And that's why we feel they should be included. At the original distribution, we recommended proration based on future, as with the original distribution, we would recommend that the bonuses be prorated based on the amount of time or hours the employees actually worked. So a part-time employee would not get as much as a full-time. We have done some research on the numbers. I don't have a lot of information on part-time staff at this point, but I have some information on long-term teacher subs.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last word? Long-term?
Long-term teaching subs, substitute teachers.
Substitute teachers, okay.
We've identified, or the initial analysis identified 187 substitutes, so less than 200 people. The total cost would be about $110,000. And the reason it's so low is because these substitutes work anywhere from 1 or 2 days to much of the year. The average net check would be $354. The bonuses range from $5 to $935. And that would be the net check. Just in order that we don't send out a whole bunch of really tiny checks, we would suggest that perhaps a threshold of $100 and above be used. That would cover 151 of the long-term subs, so all but 36. And those would be people who work more than 20 days. The only other thing that I have to add is if you decide that we should provide bonuses to specific employees or specific groups of employees, that you would authorize the superintendent to do that, along with authorized transfers, budget transfers, between budget lines and major expenditure categories. It is possible that we would need to shift some money from parts of the budget that have more than is needed to those which might not have enough. Dr. Martin, that's all I had. If there are some questions, I'll be glad to try to address those along with my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Go ahead, Ms. Smith, and then Ms. Basine.
How many employees are there in the part-time nutrition, bus driver assistants, and part-time custodians?
How many of those? I don't have the numbers. I don't believe there's a huge number, but I don't have those numbers.
Okay,
We're still searching. I mean, we're still working on that.
okay. So you don't
Oh,
know,
sorry.
it shouldn't be more than?
It's not a huge amount of money.
Okay. That was where I was thinking. Thanks.
Is that all, Ms. Smith?
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Basine.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. So in regards to the long-term substitute teachers, if I heard you correctly, some could have been working 2 days to the full week. Did I hear that correctly? Or-
there was one, there was at least one that, actually, there were 3 or 4 that only worked one day. So I'm assuming that either something didn't work because they were paid as a long-term sub, but long-term subs usually work for more than a day.
Yeah.
Most of them worked more than 20 days. There were 151 who worked over 20 days.
Right. So that's why I was asking. So when I envision a long-term sub, that they're truly working, for a long term for some set period. So I wonder if we even have certain parameters that we set where we're not, at least in my mind, I wasn't thinking about the long-term sub that worked for 1 day or 2 days,
No, and you would.
but like you said, had worked similar hours to what our contracted employees. And for me, that doesn't fit that definition. So I don't know if other members feel the same way, but.
Dr. Birdsong, do you have a recommendation?
I was going to clarify for Mrs. Basine, you're absolutely right. Typically, if you have a long-term substitute and they end up working for a day or two after they have accepted a long-term substitute assignment, it's because things didn't work out. It could be that the long-term sub decided that this is not the placement for me, or the building principal decided that it wasn't a good fit. So that's why some of these teachers are showing up within that category.
Okay. So my recommendation would be then to not include long-term subs that might fall into that category. Just as you prorated, maybe there's a minimum number of days or something, but, I would leave that up to the superintendent to kind of define what that is. I would hate for us to kind of get down at that level, but.
Ms. Messing, if I may, I think Mr. Jenkins, because I was meticulously writing down, I think he said creating a threshold of $100, and that would be based off of their hours, I guess, that they would work, right?
It was equivalent to 20 days.
20 days.
20
Well,
days.
excuse me, substitutes in excess of 20 days, which is really not a very long assignment.
Right.
I mean, the superintendent could certainly recommend an appropriate amount, but when I cut it off at 20, I didn't look elsewhere. I didn't analyze further, but if we cut it off at a higher threshold, then it would go, the dollar amount would go down some. But even with including everybody who had worked more than 20 days, it was only 107,000. So it was not a huge amount for that group.
Mr. Clanton?
So, I'm fine with the 20-day, $100 threshold. My only thing that I feel like it's still missing out there and lingering for me is about those bus drivers and the other groups that were mentioned, as to what we would be doing with them. Or is that something that we're just going to table and come back, or are we giving direct, because the only thing I heard about was long-term subs, correct? That's the only recommendation.
I'm presenting that as just an example. It's
Would this be an example that we would?
It's not a huge amount. I mean, the original appropriation that you had provided was $4.8 million. Substitutes were the long-term subs were, I think, one of the bigger groups. We're still looking at the part-time. I've got some very preliminary information. But
Okay.
we need to do a full review.
So what I'm just to be clear here then is that if whatever we authorize as a threshold and a dollar amount today, you would then be able, and then authorize the superintendent, I guess, to finish flushing that through and to be able to give the authorization on the necessary budget transfers, then you would be able to go back and continue to do what you're doing and researching to address all of those subgroups.
I would suggest that you simply authorize us to make bonuses to specific groups, and that you also authorize the superintendent to make the appropriate transfers in order for us to execute that.
Are you asking us to identify those specific groups, or,
No.
okay, that's,
He identified them.
okay.
Well,
I think he needs to repeat them. Could you repeat them,
Right,
Mr.
it
Jenkins?
was a long, it was,
a recommendation,
writing
there were
down.
only 4.
Okay.
Those were the long-term teaching subs, long-term teacher substitutes, part-time workers in support of student nutritional services, And the third one is actually a subset of the second. Bus drivers and bus assistants who took on responsibilities of the school nutritional staff and part-time custodial employees.
Okay.
Those are the ones that we recommended.
Go ahead, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. I'd like to maybe go back to the top. So the 4.8 million that we previously approved, that provided for how many employees?
It was over 3,500, I believe. It had been 3,700, but it was well over 3,000.
We have, in the school division, we have how many full-time employees?
Don't have that number before me, but it's well over 4,000. That would be full-time equivalent employees, so part-timers are counted only as a fraction. That's full-time equivalents. So we would actually have more employees than that.
I'm just trying, if I understand correctly, of those that received they were part of the 4.8 million, all of those were full-time, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that we provided bonuses for 3,500 to 3,700 full-time employees?
Yes, sir.
So my question is, then we should have some sense of how many full-time employees did not receive a bonus, correct? Based upon the original 4.8.
I did not do that tally, sir. I mean, I can tell you that the groups that did not receive bonuses would be the people working in this building, central administrators and their staff, people in transportation, and most of school plant, with the exception of those who were directly involved in sanitizing school facilities. And that was a very small number.
So of the 3,500 to 3,700 that have received bonuses, did that take up the entire 4.8 million?
It took a little more than the 4.8.
Okay, so it's a little more than that. And then, because one of the things that I was hoping we would get was who received bonuses from the initial allocation and what their categories were, job.
Well, I mean, I can review with you.
Well, no, I don't, I like to see it in writing. I can't follow.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that everybody that was on a teacher contract, which is the biggest single group, whether they were classroom teachers or psychologists or school social workers, speech pathologists, anybody that was on a teacher contract was included in the bonuses. The principals, the administrative part of schools were included, along with the office staff. The library, media specialists, the custodians in the building, the food service folks in the building. So anybody that reported to a school principal was included.
Right, because if you recall, when we were having the discussion previously, and originally we were talking about the IT team.
Yes.
So originally we had the ITRTs, then we talked about the help desk and other engineers that also keep the technology infrastructure running.
Correct.
Lest there be no.
And that staff was included.
So everyone in who in the IT infrastructure would not be included from a full-time perspective?
Did not include everybody, but it included the network engineers, and it included all of the ITRTs, and there were various other people that were serving in, I think, at the help desk. Dr. Cataldo might be able to to chime in, but it included a lot of them, but not every single one.
Right. So I guess where I was going, trying to figure out how many employees we had and who received a bonus in terms of full-time employees.
There,
What stops us from just making sure that full-time employees are taken care of outside of the whatever the administrative team that you all identified wouldn't fit? I'm just, from my own perspective, I'm just trying to figure out which
I'm happy to
IT
address
folks y'all
that.
decide are worthy and which ones aren't. I guess, and I don't mean it that way, but which ones qualify and which ones do not.
Go ahead, Dr. Birdsong.
So in a nutshell, when we talked about providing employees bonuses, we wanted to ensure that the employees that went above and that had to go outside of their job description, learn new skills, they were at a higher risk than the average employee of helping us manage through this pandemic. So those are the employees that we hope to provide a bonus to. Certainly, there were employees who continued to fulfill their job descriptions, but they didn't have to change the way that they did their work. So we were very deliberate in identifying who those employees were. Certainly our classroom teachers on the front lines, our school nutrition staff on the front lines, our custodians on the front lines. We had issues with our technology, our infrastructure. So we identified staff who were instrumental in getting us where we needed to be, building back our systems so that we could operate the school division. We were very intentional about identifying those folks. So if you came to work every day, Mr. Jordan, and you didn't necessarily have to do anything different, we were very blessed that we didn't have to lay off anybody. We didn't lay off anybody in Norfolk Public Schools. A lot of school divisions had to let people go. We took good care of our people. They continued to get a paycheck. Some of them, unfortunately, did not have the workload that they normally would have during a normal year. So that's why we wanted to identify the staff that had to go above and beyond for the bonuses. So I hope that helps to clarify a bit about.
It does some. I just don't know what that, how that was determined. I guess the point I'm trying to get to is, obviously I support the bonuses. I have bias because I do have a technology background and have done tech support and help desk support and all kinds of support, and at least in the engineering world, one piece connects to another, and it's not always understood how it's connected, and that's why I'm asking those questions in particular. But I wanted to try to get an understanding of what we did with the resources that we have, and then what we are proposing to do now, so that as we look at additional funding support for the positions that we are recommending, then at least we have a sense of our employee base, especially our full-time employee base, who received and who didn't. That's all I'm trying to get
I would say
a
that
hold
we
of.
included all of the tech support, all of the help desk, and the engineers, the network engineers. They were included. The more senior folks that were in the IT department, the management managerial positions, I don't believe were included, but the network engineers certainly were, and the ones that were working the support desk, I believe they were included. Dr. Pataldo, is that correct? Yes.
Yes, we had some that were included from network services as well as student information services. And if you remember, the ITRTs function much in the fact that they worked as help desk. Because the help desk, we had, the help desk, we had used Zoom phones. And so when folks, parents needed some support, what they would do is they would reach out on the phones and that would get to an ITRT. So we had a lot of that support, building-based.
I guess what I'm trying to express to my colleagues is we're with the original 4.8, we took unspent funds and provided resources to support the bonuses. When we discussed this last week, we know we have additional unspent funds. So to the extent that we are able to take unspent funds that were originally intended to support employees, that we make an effort to do something for employees, and then you all can figure out what that differentiated do something is. That's where I'm trying to get to and have an understanding of why, as a board, since we appropriated funds to support our employees who support our teaching and learning and the running of our division, why we would not take this opportunity to try to make sure that everybody gets something, although some may get more because they go above and beyond, and use that money as was intended to support our staff rather than having it end up not being supported for our staff, and then we decide later to allocate it for something different. So that's why I was trying to get a sense of the numbers, so that, okay, somebody might get a $25 gift card or acknowledgement, but others may get the full 1,000 or whatever it is that is recommended. But because we do have unspent funds, and we've been taking funds out of classroom instruction and using them in other areas, that why not take the funds that were intended to benefit our employee base and use it to benefit our employee base?
Can I ask a clarification question? So are you saying that, because, the strategy that I heard was that the the employees that were considered for the one-time bonus were employees that worked above and beyond their traditional job description. So are you saying to go beyond that and to try to give something to everyone? Okay, even if it's $25?
Yes.
I agree with that right now.
I mean, it's nothing to, we're just having
But just want to be clear on what you were saying. Go ahead, Mr. Clanton.
Yeah, I understand, and I believe that Mr. Jordan, your comments and the suggestion that you're making is with good intention, but it just, looking at where we are at the end of the year, looking at what had been announced to us from a finance predicament, a whole bunch of small checks, but also no matter what we do, there's going to be somebody who's going to be left out. And I think that based on what we have been presented to us when what Dr. Birdsong was just trying to elaborate to us again, those who had to do things that were outside of the norm. If you were a bus driver, and from what I'm hearing here, and if you had to come in and be a part-time cafeteria worker or a custodian to pick up those, that's outside of your norm. And also in those particular expenditures, you had potential exposure. Because we had individuals that were picking up packages from you, and as well as going into the environments. I think that the administration has given us 3 different categories. That's when we went back here, and I think this was the long-term subs, the part-time workers, school nutrition, and school bus drivers or bus assistants who had to take on, I think, the school nutrition or the custodial staff. Am I right in hearing that?
Those are correct, Mr. Clancy.
Okay. And then I also heard that we would set a threshold of $100 for that based on the hours. I think that was like 20 days or 20 hours or something like that?
I threw 100 out as just an example. I mean, I think that was used in relation to only the long-term teacher subs, just to give some indication of how many people were involved and the size of the checks they would receive.
So this is where it makes it a little frustrating for me, because if that's an example, I had two different categories that I don't have an example for, that I can give a clear direction from the board in a motion form to say to the administration is what I need you to do. So it's either a dollar amount in my mind that we say, here's the amount of money that we have left over or whatever else, and leave it up to the superintendent to identify out of these three different groups, and to be able to authorize the blood transfer, so that that's done so those individuals could receive it. I think based on the last discussion we had at our last board meeting, I think it was like the July 8th or something payday or something like that. I just need to be able to give, in my opinion, some clear direction on where we're going to go. And is it going to be more than $110,000?
It would be $110,000 for the long-term subs. To include the other three categories will be more.
How much?
Again, I don't have that number. It's not going to be a huge amount. I can tell you I'm confident the whole thing would be less than $500,000.
I have a question. I just have a question for clarification. Okay, so I guess I'm not understanding also why, if we were based on what I previously said, if you all decided to give the bonuses to those who worked above and beyond their job description, why are we back here? Like, why didn't you take care of everyone that did that? Or am I missing something here? Why are we deciding to also provide monies for other people who were not considered,
Because
that
they
went
weren't
above and beyond their
contracted.
job description?
That was the key word, right? Because they
Yes,
weren't
sir.
contracted.
We were, the original proposal brought to you was full-time contracted personnel.
Okay, so these are
And
non-contracted.
these are non-contracted.
These are
and
non-contracted,
Also
but they
went
did
above
those
and beyond
jobs.
their job description.
But
Okay.
having brought this up, we looked at it again and gave it some thought, and we agreed with you on the part-time positions, the long-term substitutes that were working in lieu of a full-time teacher, and then the folks who worked in food services. There's not a huge group of them, but we.
When you say not a lot of money, is that under $110,000?
It could be 110 just for the long-term subs, and that's the biggest group. The whole thing is not going to be a large amount of money. I mean, if I could, I would suggest that you indicate what the parameters are, and then authorize the superintendent to make payments and make transfers if and as necessary, and then we can inform you of the exact amount in July.
I would actually have preferred a recommendation on what the parameters could possibly be from the administration.
And he did provide that. If you
For all
will repeat those,
categories?
Mr. Jenkins, in terms of the 20 days that you mentioned a little earlier
Okay.
as a threshold.
We could say simply, those employees who worked, the long-term subs who worked for more than 20 days would receive a bonus proportionate to the time that they worked. And that the part-time employees in the three groups, folks who worked in the child nutrition services, bus drivers and bus assistants who worked in child nutrition services, and part-time custodians also be provided bonuses commensurate with the hours that they worked.
Okay.
And if you wish to put a $100 threshold on that, we can do that too, or just leave it and just pay it out proportionately. Either one we
Ms.
can
Smith,
do.
go ahead.
Mr. Jenkins, that's what I was going to ask you. Considering the long-term subs are the largest group at approximately 110, if we only stuck to these four, and we did a not to exceed 250K, would that work?
I think it would. But again, I haven't got all the analysis for the part-time employees. And also, I've got one source on the long-term teacher subs, but the Human Resources Office is also going through and we've got some confirmation that has to be done. I would suggest a larger amount just to make sure we don't come short.
So if I
So
can.
what is your recommendation? Because I'm having difficulty seeing beyond that number if we already have like 187 of the long-term subs, and you said it's not a large number. So 250
Preliminary-
is double that, more than double that number.
Preliminary number looked small, yes, that is true.
Okay, preliminary. So what do you recommend?
No, I was just gonna ask some clarification. So any money so let's say we did 500,000, any of that money that's not spent, that, so give them a larger buffer, and that's not spent, then just gets moved over, it gets put over into the budget, and then we would have to, I guess, go to council for anything like we would do reversion
That we
funds.
don't spend.
Would fall
It'd just be
into the-
unspent, right?
Would fall into the reversion accounts,
It'd be unspent dollars.
yes.
Okay.
Which, that's what will happen anyway.
Yeah, if we don't do anything now, but then we'd have to go back and.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Jordan.
I just want to go back to my earlier question. Maybe I'll ask it another. What will it take for, how much time or effort would it take to be able to quantify for the board of the original 4.8 million, how many full-time employees received a bonus and how many did not? I'm not sure I'm following what's the
There's
difficulty in determining
there's over
that.
3,000 that did. I believe it's around 3,700 or 3,500. There are approximately 500 or 520 contracted employees that did not. Most of those are either in transportation, the central administrative building, and in fact, all of them are in the central office here, transportation, and facilities. All of those are folks that were not working directly with children and did not endure the extraordinary efforts that, for instance, a classroom teacher did.
Classroom teachers are pretty clear for me.
Yeah.
It's like when we were having conversations earlier in the budget and we were talking about, and I don't know all the classifications, that's why I'm trying to get you all to help, student data support folks, school information systems folks, business
All of
information.
those were included because they actually are at a schoolhouse.
Right, but what happens if I get the schoolhouse personnel. If you're doing the back office support and you happen to reside in the central office building, are you saying they do or they do not, they did or they did not get a bonus?
With the exception of technology, of the technology positions, they did not.
Okay, so everyone in IT got something.
Didn't say everyone, but there was a large group that did. The ones who.
Again, Mr., if I may, not all most central office staff did not get the bonus. Again, what we tried to do is we tried to identify specific individuals who had to do their work differently, who we believe would rate a bonus. And so, as in a leadership team, all of the chiefs, they evaluated the work of their staff. I'm just speaking of central office because we know the schools, that's easy. So the majority of central office staff did not get the bonus because they did not have to do their job differently. And many of us as leaders, we believe that our employees should be recognized for going above and beyond. So there were a few central office individuals who got the bonus, but again, that was after an evaluation of what they had to do above and beyond to get us through this pandemic.
Right. So, for example, at one point we had security challenges, right, with our systems. And so folks had to work, I'm quite sure, above and beyond in order to address those issues. So those individuals, I imagine,
Yes,
were compensated.
yes.
We were having discussions about, we were dealing with the calendar, and we had discussion about one of the information systems or something that we said we couldn't do something because we had to rebuild something else. I'm just trying to make sure that you are a support person who happen to have your office in this building, or perhaps someplace else, that played a critical role in making sure that our virtual learning, our data support, that those folks were taken care of. And I'm just struggling because I don't understand why why we just can't produce a list and be able to see it. But larger than that, I don't have any objection to what's being recommended. I just don't feel comfortable not knowing in writing who met the criteria that was established and not. And I just didn't know that we were having struggles getting there. I thought we would be able to there by today.
We can certainly provide you, I don't have it here at this moment, but we can certainly provide you with a summary of the positions that received. I'm sorry, Dr. Birdsong.
Go ahead, Dr. Birdsong.
Jordan, seriously, I believe that's the work of the administration. To me, that's very operational. That was the work of the chiefs and the leadership team to look at the job descriptions of their employees, to evaluate their work, which you pay them to do. And so that's what we have done. And so the people that we identified are the ones that received the bonus.
I'm not asking you to.
It sounds like you're asking for an individual list of
people's
people who
names.
received the bonus, and I believe, I just perceive that to be the work of the administration. You charged us with going back and doing a reevaluation to provide a little more flexibility, which we did. We went back through, we listened very carefully with the recommendations that the board provided. We agreed that some of the groups of those people, beyond full-time contracted employees should be compensated. We looked at that very carefully. We spent time with that. And I think we've done our best to provide the information that you need as a board to make a decision around if you want to move forward with our recommendation or not. And
Well,
again, very respectfully.
Well, I respect that, and respectfully, I'm just saying as an individual board member who raised this issue at the last meeting, who sent an email out asking for whether or not we could get information. I did not ask for individuals. I asked by job category and classification. I received indication that we would receive that information. And all I'm saying is I feel like, again, I'm in a meeting where I'm being asked to vote on something, which I am supportive of us doing, but the fact that to me, it's almost like flashback to when we were having the conversation about the pay and comp piece. I don't think is anything below the line or extraordinarily operational to know how many full-time employees we have, of those full-time employees who received a bonus and what their category is. I think that's basic information. I think that's what's in a budget. And so I'm not asking you to tell me the evaluation of each individual employee. But I do think that if we're having a conversation about adding more categories, being able to have an understanding of where we started and what we did would be helpful in determining who we would add.
And I'll repeat, there were approximately 3,700 employees who received bonuses, and there are approximately a little over 500 employees, full-time contracted, who did not.
What I'm hearing is, and I agree with Mr. Jordan, is to have a visible list of the categories and the job classifications and, who got what and who didn't. That would have just been more helpful to guide this discussion.
I mean, I have a list of the categories. There's about 14 categories. I've mentioned most of them already.
Okay.
Everybody that works in a school building. It included nurses. I mean, all of these categories: custodial employees, athletic directors and trainers, custodial staff, the security staff, school facilities personnel involved in sanitizing. There were about 3. There weren't a huge number. And then we talked about the IT staff at length. Those were the ones. Everybody that worked in a school.
Mr. Clanton, go ahead.
Just to clarify, Mr. Jenkins, do we have at least $500,000 in that?
Yes,
line?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to put forth a motion for consideration at this point. Based on the recommendation of the administration, that we authorize $500,000 to be.
Up to?
Up to $500,000 to be designated for additional bonuses for the following special groups. Long-term sub.
One-time bonuses.
One-time bonuses, correct. For long-term subs, and that being set at 20 days, hours worked. Part-time workers who worked in school child nutrition. Bus drivers and bus assistants who had to take on additional work duties in child nutrition, as well as part-time custodial staff. Did I get all the cuts?
Yes, yes, sir.
All right. And that we authorize the budget transfer and give that to the authorization to the superintendent. I think I've covered. Did I cover everything?
Yes, sir.
Can I get a second on the motion? Anyone want to amend the motion in any way?
A clarification.
Sure.
So if we are authorizing up to 500,000 and then also authorizing for budget transfer, can you explain the budget transfer piece?
I'd be glad to. It is possible that, for instance, in order to provide part-time custodial employees with a bonus, that there may not be enough money in the part-time custodial, in the custodial budget line, the amount for custodial wages. We may need to move a little bit of money between individual budget lines and major categories in order to pay the bonus. Overall, there's enough money in the budget, but it might be that we need to make some transfer between budget categories. And generally, what we have done in the past is we have notified you of transfers that we made in excess of $50,000. This one could be over 50. With advice of counsel, Mr. Cloud had suggested that we also get authorization to make any necessary budget transfers, again, up to the amount that was authorized. Does that help, or is that not?
That helps.
I mean, there would be categories that have surpluses, and there could be categories that don't have enough money in them, so we would simply transfer between different categories.
I guess my concern is that, we may, anyway, I'll hold on that
So,
comment.
Madam Chair, if I can, because I don't want to feel as though I ignored my colleagues' concerns in the respect of some type of reporting. So as an amendment to my motion, everything else but that we be presented with a report that categorizes every subgroup that we have given bonuses and what those total amounts are.
Any objection or questions? Go ahead, Ms. Basine.
I do absolutely agree with that, and I guess that's where my hesitation is coming in, is that, I guess I was expecting, a presentation that would highlight, what the categories are, what were the determining factors that led to the identification of those, which I know has been described to us, and has actually been better described to us today, as well. So, but that's where my hesitation, lies with.
What is your hesitation? Which part?
Well, I was just saying up to 500,000, and then with the transfers and not knowing exactly how that might look or how much that might be, without having the actual numbers of what the potential costs of allocating bonuses to each of those categories. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to take away, I know this will be based on surplus and moving, especially with the transfers, but taking, money away from areas that we know directly, all of these areas directly impact student outcomes in some way or shape, but.
If I could add, what we would be doing is using a portion of what would otherwise revert to the fund balance. So it's not pulling off of anything that we plan to do. It's not reducing any instructional services that have already been provided to students, schools out.
Okay.
It will not diminish instruction at all. What it will do is it will reduce the amount of reversion money you have, the excess money that City Council has allowed you to have reappropriated for one-time purposes in the future. So these would be from funds that would not otherwise be spent.
Okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, to ask again, the motion's on the floor. If there is, there's a second from any of my colleagues. If not, I'd like to make an incidental motion. Is there a second?
There's a second?
Okay. So with that, Madam Chair, I move to table this item until our July work session, that we add this to the agenda, and that the items regarding the request of our colleagues regarding the report of what has been spent by category be presented to us in a solid recommendation from the administration with dollar amounts, and then we just have to go about this another way.
Yeah, and then we'd vote on it at our July 21st business meeting.
Yep.
So it'd be delayed almost a month.
Need a second?
By our July what?
It would be delayed a month, our vote, it'd be July 21st, at our July 21st business.
Oh,
meeting.
21st, I thought you said first.
I-
Okay.
If I could just,
Question
Second,
on
Madam
that?
Chair, there's a motion on the floor. We need to,
Yep. So,
I made an incidental motion. This was to postpone till our,
did you haven't gotten a second yet, have you?
nope, I hadn't heard a second. Do you all agree? All right, so we still on the main motion.
Okay, so you withdrew. Go ahead, Mr. Jordan.
Dr. Martin, I do have one concern about postponing, and that is the year is almost up, and something done on July 21st will be a fiscal '22 transaction.
Right.
Thank you.
Question.
Sure.
So when we were working on our fiscal year '22 proposed budget, estimated, at least for full-time equivalents for fiscal year 2021, that we had 4,106.85 FTEs. If I understand the recommendation from the administration, with the long-term subs, the part-time school nutrition, the bus driver and bus assistants, and part-time custodial workers, that adds up to some additional number. So I would move that we provide a bonus to all full-time FTEs, with the exception of the whatever category the high-level central administrators fall in, plus the 4 categories that were mentioned today: term sub, part-time school nutrition with qualifications, bus drivers and bus assistants with qualifications, part-time custodials with qualifications, and that we authorize the superintendent to be able to make appropriate transfers in order to provide that bonus compensation.
Is there a second?
Objection to the question consideration. What difference is your motion from what we just talked about? You haven't given me a dollar amount. You've talked about every FTE.
So what difference is between
What
mine and
difference
yours?
is the motion that you just made, Mr. Jordan, than the motion that I gave with a dollar amount, other than saying every FTE with no dollar amount?
That is the difference.
What's the dollar amount?
I don't know what the dollar amount is.
Then how? Okay, to me, I just think that's really backwards.
What's the
We
backwards
gave a
part?
dollar amount up to $500,000, and now you're just saying every FTE with no dollar amount.
So I'm not sure the focus.
The focus
I'm
is
not-
you just got on the
you
administration,
asked
I've
me-
given you a dollar
You asked me a
amount.
question. I'm trying to give you an answer.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. So as I said earlier, and as I said last week, I'm at the disadvantage in that I don't have the information in front of me. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is my recommendation or my motion was attempting to provide an opportunity for there to be compensation for all FTEs. I'm also trying to, because I don't know what that is at the moment, I am giving the administration the authority from the board in order to provide the funding to support the motion that I put on the floor. So I'm not sure what is it that is bothersome at this point in time to you.
You haven't identified an amount. To me, that's fiscally irresponsible. We're talking about a transfer. We just said here talking about we don't know where the money's coming from.
We do know what are you saying we don't know where the money's coming
Well,
from?
no, I'm just saying the first motion that we just had on this floor gave a dollar amount and it gave a specific group down there.
And it
Now
failed
we're
for
coming
lack
back
of a
around and
second.
saying all FTEs, and you're just saying to authorize the administration to make transfers without knowing what that dollar amount is.
My preference would be to be in this meeting and have the information that was requested so that we could act accordingly. I don't have that information in front of me. So I don't want to table it until July, because when we talked about it at the last meeting, the reason why we came back today was to try to make sure that we could address whatever needed to be addressed in this time period, was my understanding, that we were trying to do this before June 30th, right? So I requested information to understand who received bonuses and who didn't. I don't have that in front of me, okay? What I am suggesting is that maybe to make it a little easier for us, then rather than trying to go through the process of whatever it means to go above and beyond and so forth, that we just acknowledge that it took a team of X to achieve what we achieved in order to provide support for our students and staff during the pandemic. And so we carried over multiple funds to begin with, which is how we had the 4.8 to deal with. we know that we are getting ready to carry over another amount of significant funds. So all I'm saying is, rather than carrying over these funds, let's take the funds that we know that we have available to us, acknowledge all of our all of our full-time employees, in addition to those that have been identified in these 4 categories, and provide them with a bonus as recognition for their hard work and effort and all the things that we've talked about in the midst of this pandemic. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, the difference would be the lack of dollar amount and including all full-time employees.
Well, I mean,
Still
if
don't
they
know how
gave
much
me
it is. And
I'm
that-
sorry?
Right, but I'm just noting that there's not just one difference, there's 2 differences.
Yeah, so okay.
There are over 500 employees that did, full-time
500 employees that
employees
fit
that
that?
did not.
So that's what, if we just did an average 500,000, if we did $1,000 for each person?
Well, no, because there are taxes involved too. I
Taxes.
mean, when we distributed the bonuses, full-time personnel that had been here the whole year received a $1,000 check. It takes $1,500 and I think $48 to net somebody that check after required federal and state taxes.
Jordan, could you at least, in your motion, put some type of threshold? Because right now, we don't know how much we're giving the people.
Jenkins, can you give me a guesstimated threshold?
For the 500, it was over, and I'm sorry, sir, because this was not part of the recommendation, so I don't have it in front of me. It was less than $1 million, but it was, I think it was over 800,000, or around 800,000.
Okay,
But I can't tell you definitively.
So,
And that was just the 500 full-time contracted, did not include the long-term teacher subs or the part-time positions, because that staff is still working on. I would just, if I could remind you, we met Wednesday, so, and Friday was a holiday, so our staff has had Thursday and Monday, and a little bit of today. So they're working on it, but I don't have that for you.
yeah, and I just want to be clear. I respect that, and I just, I think sometimes we just say that it's helpful. But does $1.2 million, is that an acceptable threshold? That's the 1 million that you just mentioned plus the, I'm sorry, 1.5 million. That's the 1 million that you mentioned plus the 500,000 that you had before.
Give us the parameters as to where we cut off, I presume.
yeah, and that's where my concern is that including all full-time employees and not just going with recommendation really exponentially
That's-
increases the dollar amount. I mean, we started at, 110,000, 150,000, and we went to 500, now we're up to over 1 million. I mean, I really think that, I just think that we should probably be more intentional
Yeah.
with the classifications and the dollar amount. Go ahead, Ms. Smith. I'm sorry, Ms. Basine has had her hand
Oh,
up,
I'm
and then
sorry.
Ms. Smith.
No, that's okay. I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, mines keep coming and going. But I was gonna
Keep on
say,
coming.
I was gonna say something to the effect of not knowing the exact number that we're talking about. While I'm confident the numbers won't exceed whatever the fund balance is gonna be, because it's gonna be pretty high. I struggle in good conscience doing what I would consider is writing a blank check. That's bothersome for me. Also, writing a check for, well, it's the same thing, blank with an unlimited amount, not really knowing what the impact of that would be. And I just can't in good conscience support that.
Are you willing to come up with a motion that has the parameters that you would be comfortable within?
Let me think about it. we're so far behind, well, he gave us some numbers, the 500, right?
Well, for the four groups that Dr. Birdsong has recommended, 500,000 will cover it.
But 500,000 would cover that, but then the
initial-
approximately 500 employees who did not receive bonuses.
Number was somewhere close to 800,000,
Oh, 800,000.
right? Because we have to pay 1,548 to net 1,000.
Say that again?
You have to pay 1,500 and some dollars
Yeah,
in order
yeah,
to
yeah.
net 1,000
Got you.
federal and state taxes.
So we're looking at a not to exceed 1.3 million?
And that pays a bonus to every employee, top to bottom. And Dr. Birdsong had recommended, her recommendation was different, but
The intention was, again, to recognize those who had worked above and beyond their job description.
if I could offer, those were included in the original recommendation. Everyone who worked above and beyond regular expectations.
So now we're, yeah, and now we have the four, but I'm sorry, the transportation staff, I see them that assisted with nutrition, child nutrition as being above and beyond the job description as well, so.
I don't have a recommendation.
Ms. Basine?
This is a very difficult discussion because this is, we moved it to this week because from last week so that we could have the appropriate information and data to guide this decision-making. And here we are, the whole, I regret that some of this discussion is contentious, but part of that is because we don't have that information in front of us to really guide the decision-making. I'm uncomfortable with either of the motions because I don't have that information like explicitly stated in front of me. So I just want to express that to my colleagues that that is the reason why I am not chiming up to second any motion right now. But it sounds like we don't have the opportunity to postpone this discussion until a later date where we can get that information. Is that correct? And where we can have a discussion that's more productive at a time, at another time. Honestly, I'm disappointed we don't have that in front of us right now.
Go ahead, Dr. Birdsong.
So, to be clear, the administration was tasked with going back and doing another review of staff who we believed, after this board's discussion last week, who we could also consider bringing back a recommendation to the board for a bonus. The bonuses were previously given to full-time contracted staff, ... who went above and beyond their job description and who we believed were at greater risk during this pandemic, and we wanted to recognize them going above and beyond. With that charge, we did come back today with recommendations, clear recommendations around who we believe additional staff should be. So that information has been provided. We also provided the dollar amount around how much that would cost. So any miscellaneous emails that we've received, again, we believe what we have done, what the will of the board was, which was to go back, do another review of staff who didn't receive the bonuses and make a recommendation. And that's what we've done today. So there have been additional questions asked today, and Mr. Jenkins is doing his very best to answer the questions. There were questions now around full-time staff and how many staff are in that group. He said approximately 500. There was also information about how much would that cost. He responded $800,000. So I'm not clear what other information we were charged with providing that we haven't provided, because I do believe that we did address what the will of the board was. We went back, we did the review, we gave you the recommendation, and we're telling you how much it's going to cost if the board decides to move in that direction.
But it was, in addition, was to understand all of the classifications and who got bonuses and who didn't.
And I think Mr. Jenkins has explained that. We're just
We just
going in
can't come
circles at
together
this
and-
point.
We just can't come together on
Right,
motion.
right.
I'm sorry, Dr. Martin, can you
We
repeat?
can't come together on a motion here.
Yeah, I mean, we have a motion that's on the floor for Mr. Jordan. Kind of had some discussion, I raised
Can I
an
add a s-
objection. There hasn't been a
There hasn't been a
second.
second.
So at
It
that point,
dies.
it feels for lack of a second.
This can be addressed at a later date.
I mean, and that's the one thing I did want to say.
Same way,
Yep.
the same way the first round of bonuses came out of the reversion funds, a second round can also come out of the reversion funds after additional information that the board feel is needed is received.
What I understood from Mr. Jenkins was that it would come, if we wait until July 21st, that it'll come out of the fiscal year 22 budget. Is that correct?
Dr. Martin, that is correct, and if we were to do it in the same manner we did in the past, and we did not budget for a bonus in the fiscal '22 budget, obviously. So we would have to ask for reappropriation of those funds from city council.
From the reversion funds, one time. It would still stay in line with one-time expenditure or one-time cost. That's what we did this time, so it wouldn't be any different.
So why can't we just start with the recommendation? Why can't we just start with with accepting the recommendation today?
Oh, so accepting the recommendation with the intent to come back and,
I said, and authorize the funding.
for the categories that Mr. Jordan is recommending. Is that what
On
you're,
employees.
is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, so we could accomplish this today, and if we wanted to come back and expand it to all full-time employees who hadn't gotten the bonus, which is what was in Mr. Jordan's
Right.
motion, we could do that at a later date.
In other words, I guess the original motion I made with what the administration's proposed was, we take care of that today, but we come back in July to see about expanding, and we can take care of that with the additional reversion funds that we may potentially have.
I'd like to hear if Mr. Jordan, since he made the second recommendation,
Yeah, I mean,
if that
it's
would
open,
be,
no one's,
yeah.
go ahead.
The only reason I won't say the only reason, a reason that I went to the all full-time employees is because I didn't feel comfortable and clarity around who got and who didn't. I'm just sharing with you my viewpoint. After we had the meeting last week, I had employees contact me that said that they felt they were notified that they were going to receive a bonus. And then when the bonuses got paid, they didn't receive one. And so there was confusion around whether or not everyone who was recommended to receive one, whether or not they received one or not. And so I was trying to get clarity around that. I appreciate what Dr. Birdsong has offered. I appreciate what Mr. Jenkins has offered. I couldn't figure it out. And I thought we would get some report that would show that was transparent, everybody could just see it. So in the absence of that, that's why I thought it was just easier And rather than trying to go through picking and choosing, to provide something for everyone, since we know we have unexpended funds that we could utilize to support that. And then based upon the discussion that we had, I thought whether it was 1.3 million or whether it was 1.5 million, that would have sufficed to meet the threshold number that I thought the board deemed was important, address the 4 categories that have been recommended, and allow for the administration to go forward and take care of that, knowing that we are going to receive this written report at some point in time. So the only thing that I understand that what I may be offering that may be concerning is that that someone who did not go in above and beyond would receive a bonus or compensation. I guess that was the issue. But as I understood the original presentation was that there was some assessment or evaluation that was going into determining how much a person received. So I was simply trying to say that if everybody received, but the administration still had the flexibility to determine what they received based upon how much they went above and beyond, then that would simplify it for the board, and also be able to take funds that were originally intended to support personnel, to continue to support personnel, and to address the additional personnel that we have addressed that, but for the conversation we had last week, we wouldn't be addressing any of this. So I was trying to simplify it, not make it more complicated. But if
Quick
somebody
thing,
wants
and
to
I'm not going to belong this. I just want to make sure that I heard this right. Mr. Jenkins, how much money did we identify for bonuses?
4.8 million. Yes, sir.
So the money that we're talking about now is in addition to what we've already said that we were going to expense. Made a proposal, we heard about 200,000, 500,000. Now we're talking about an additional $1.3 million potentially above what we already decided that we were going to give. That's where I feel that's where my concern is. And I know and I understand, and Ms. Pacini, I appreciate you talking about the contingency piece. I'm just a little tired. It's been a long day, so my apologies. Just trying to get it in there. But I understand. We're at a timeline. We take action today. Some employees or all employees, or whatever we want to do, will receive something. If we don't take action today, it will be delayed and we'll have to go through another process. It doesn't mean that they won't get something. But we have to pick and choose. Do we want this additional information and wait and get all this additional information and be comfortable to move? Or we're going to go out and give a blanket check? I guess with some now that we've done discussion, we've identified it's going to be an additional $1.3 million if we do all full-time employees. So we just need to put a motion on the floor. And I don't know, Mr. Jordan, if that goes back to you, so that we can just take an action and vote on this and get moving. Because
He hasn't gotten a second on his motion, so.
Huh?
He hasn't gotten a second on his motion.
Are we still on the same motion? That's what we're still
I
at?
failed.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody
All
seconded.
right, so I really don't want to waste everyone's time tonight. But there's been no action.
Well, because we're going into a new fiscal year, I would say, at least to my colleagues, that so that we know that we're talking about this from here, that we at least postpone this item. If we're not going to take any action today, that we postpone it and we identify it in the new fiscal year in July, that we're going to talk about this so that we can keep it on the radar in regards to if we're going to talk about those reversion dollars. But that we don't leave here tonight without some type of action for direction for ourselves for the next half of the new year, the new fiscal year.
Yeah, we can add it to our retreat discussion and then vote, you know, for voting on it at our July 21st business meeting. But I'm really disappointed that we weren't able to come together tonight for any action. We wasted a lot of time. So,
But before you hit the gavel, I don't want to prevent anyone from getting anything. I don't. So if somebody else wants to put another motion on the floor, I can do that, but
you want to make a motion, Ms. Basine?
Oh,
no, go ahead.
well, you can finish your comment.
No,
Well,
I'm-
I think the first motion that Mr. Clanton made, if you wouldn't mind reading that again, because I think that I too don't want to prevent employee groups that, as Dr. Birdsong stated already, that they had identified based on certain criteria. You know, I don't want to prevent those groups from getting it, but I do want to consider the recommendation Mr. Jordan has made, you know, that we might consider in the future. But if you could reread that motion again, that would be helpful for me.
Ms. Basine, and I'm going to ask, Ms. Tanner, did you capture that when I went that first time?
I can tell you what I got, and then you can tell me what we needed. We had authorized $500,000 to be designated for additional one-time bonus for the special groups with the long-term subs, part-time workers, child nutrition workers, bus drivers, and part-time custodial staff, and authorized the budget transfer option to the superintendent. Will be presented a report that categorizes the bonuses for those other groups, full-time employee groups.
Only thing I think I missed was bus assistance.
It
Drivers
was
and bus
the
assistants?
the transportation staff who assisted with child nutrition.
Yep.
Specifically.
Substitute teachers specifically.
Substitute
Do we-
teachers.
Clarifying question on that, do we have to specify that that will be prorated, or the parameters that we set in the motion?
So adding it to be prorated, and I think we also mentioned 20 days for the substitute teachers, correct?
Long-term substitute
Long-term
teachers.
substitute teachers.
And did you also include the authorization to transfer between
Yeah, I
classifications?
did
Okay.
that.
Can you read that back to us so we're clear, Ms. Tanner?
Not just blanket part-time work, okay.
Part-time nutritional staff.
Staff. So the amounts to be prorated needs to be somewhere up front. Because the administration, you all made it, for the proration piece, you all have a calculation for that, right?
Our recommendation is that
Recommendation.
we prorate it based on length of time worked.
So we're authorizing the superintendent to be able to do the budget transfer, and I would say and the administration's recommendation for proration, that we approve the administration's recommendation for proration.
Based on the time worked, yeah.
Yep,
The time worked.
time work.
Dr. Birdsong?
Just to be clear, these are the same groups that we just made a
Yes.
recommendation around, just in case the motion.
Exactly, same groups
Yes,
that the
same groups,
recommendation.
Mr. Jenkins.
Four
that-
groups.
Yes, that you presented.
I'm a,
The same, I'm just making sure what he just said with what Mr. Jenkins said, that they were aligned,
Yes.
because just in case something comes up.
Yeah. Long-time substitute teachers, part-time child nutritional workers, bus drivers, transportation
Transportation
workers,
staff.
assistants, who had to,
This with child nutrition.
Facilities with school nutrition.
so it's bus drivers and bus assistants, isn't that what you said?
Yes, sir,
No, you didn't mention transportation, you said bus drivers and bus assistants, correct?
correct.
Okay.
Who
That's
work
a special, so bus drivers and bus assistants, and then part-time custodial staff.
Okay, the drivers and assistants were those who were working in the food service operations.
Or custodial function.
Yes.
You mentioned.
Got
And
it.
they part-time
So bus
custodians.
drivers and bus assistants who worked in child nutrition and custodial capacities, and then part-time custodial staff. Those are the 4 groups, right? Okay. So we clear, everybody?
You're not clear?
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Well,
Second.
Okay.
can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Did you want any more question for discussion? Okay, Ms. Tanner, please call the roll.
Basine?
Aye.
Campson? Oh, she's not here. Clanton?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
But can we have a motion to come back and address?
We don't need a motion. I'll put it on the
Okay.
agenda and then we'll have the discussion.
Okay.
Okay, with that, thank you for everyone's time. Please be safe driving home and I call this meeting adjourned.